What's going on? I just finished watching this cat fight of Frank Tufano and Vegan Gains over vitamin D. Just another one of these very, very painful to watch conversations of two, relatively non-informed people over a single chemical compound, which is analyzed here in his essentiality for human health. And we've got on the one hand Frank Tufano, who actually has the truth on his side, but is an incredibly horrible debater. And then we've got on the other hand Vegan Gains, who is a very good debater, but unfortunately doesn't have the truth on his side. So yeah, it's really interesting to watch these kind of fights going on, Anyway, I just thought I'd make a little bit of a commentary on the subject for people who actually want to get a little bit more information. Or actually, when we are accurate here, maybe it's a little bit less information than you might think on the subject. But anyway, let's go. So, vitamin D. If we take a look at a simple Wikipedia article, which you can take for what it is. Simply, that's just a Wikipedia article. Nothing, really credible about it, as well as nothing really non-credible about it. We can already see that there is several different forms of vitamin D. There's vitamin D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. These are just the few that are listed on this site. Who knows what else exists out there? Who knows how many more forms are out there? What we can see, however, from all of these forms is that we have here a very complex chemical organic compound. Organic meaning that it consists of a lot of chemical C bonds, carbon bonds, with a lot of, hydrogen ends, so to say. And this is very characteristic for another substance group inside of the biological, organic compounds, and that's fatty acids, Fatty acids are very similar in their structure. They also have a lot of chemical C bonds, a lot of carbon bonds with simple hydrogen residues. And this is also the reason why vitamin D and all forms of vitamin D are very fat soluble. They are very fat soluble. So we've got here one of these so-called fat soluble vitamins. The fat soluble vitamins that we know of at this point are A, D, E, and K. But yet again, of each of one of these single chemical compounds, there exist a number of different forms of all of them. And to really understand, which form of which vitamin is good for this and that process, it's hard to tell. Just as well as it's so hard to tell where the, recommended dietary allowance in fact is, how much vitamin D you should have in your blood if you make a blood test. Blood levels of vitamin D, who knows whether blood levels of vitamin D are actually relevant? What's with the levels of your, intracellular fluid? What's with the levels of your lymph? Actually, when it comes to transportation of fats and fatty acids and all of these more, fatty compounds, the lymph is much more relevant than the blood, because the lymph has a much slower fluid speed, flowing speed than the blood. The blood's major purpose, the blood's major task is to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout your body. And this has to go very rapidly, this has to function very quickly. So you can't afford, I should say, a very high viscosity of this blood, which is the reason why, blood fat levels and stuff, they are very direct health markers. You shouldn't have too much of it, you should have actually really clean, fast-flowing blood. And on the other hand, we should have really nutrient-dense and rich lymph, so to say. This is why the lymph flows much slower. And this is also when you digest fats, the first, vessel system that these fats enter is actually the lymph. So these nutrients get transported through the lymph predominantly. So who knows how relevant blood levels of vitamin D actually are, It's really hard to tell. And then they only test one compound, okay? I think what they test is vitamin D3. I think vitamin D3 is the active form of this vitamin, of this compound in the human body. And its purpose is really that of a hormone, which is the reason why for a lot of people vitamin D is actually not even considered a vitamin. A vitamin is a substance that you cannot produce inside of your body, which, it becomes vital to ingest it because you can't really produce it yourself. As you might know, this is not true for vitamin D. If we get enough sun exposure, then obviously our vitamin D levels rise. This is very well established. What is not so clear is how well you can actually synthesize vitamin D if you're not consuming at least some sort of animal products. Here again, the animal products come in. There seems to be a correlation with cholesterol. There seems to be a correlation with fatty acids. And this only makes sense because vitamin D is so fat soluble. You can also get vitamin D directly from animal foods by simply eating animal foods, especially fish and, free-ranging meat from free-ranging animals that were in the sun themselves, that had the opportunity to synthesize vitamin D themselves. They then will store this vitamin in their fatty tissue because, again, the vitamin is fat soluble, so it tends, of course, to store in fatty tissue. And then you can eat this fatty tissue and get vitamin D from there. So as you can see, it's just a very lipophilic substance here that we're talking about here, and it's rather considered a hormone because of its purpose in the body, which is the calcium metabolism. So I found this actually to be a really nice follow-up video to the recent talk I did about tooth health and durian riders, missing teeth. Vitamin D is very important, probably the most important one of the fat-soluble vitamins that is involved in calcium metabolism. I've talked previously about the fact that one major sign of aging is the inability of your body to properly distribute calcium throughout its tissues. You actually want to have a high calcium density in your bones because this is hard tissue, and you want to have a low calcium density in your soft tissue because these, tissues should be mobile and move around and stuff. This is the epitome of vitality, so to say, having really soft and flexible and agile soft tissues and really, solid, rigid, hard and resistant hard tissues, to build up your skeletal structures, and especially your teeth, which are the first ones to get attacked when there's something out of balance there. So we need, first of all, the calcium, and then we need the hormones that properly distribute the calcium. And it seems to be the case that this substance that we call the vitamin D at some point is to be very responsible for the proper distribution for calcium. And the reason why we can say this as well is that we see the missing of this compound in children who develop rickets. Rickets is just a form of osteo. It's not really osteoporosis, but it is a softening of the bones because of a metabolism of calcium, essentially, and we are missing vitamin D here. This is the key factor where vitamin D was identified as playing a role there. So on the one hand, we have Frank Tufano here, who's claiming that vitamin D is, transported via cholesterol and stuff like that, which is, phrased kind of stupidly, although he is not so wrong here in a sense, because clearly vitamin D can be much better absorbed and be much better, synthesized actually in the presence of cholesterol and fatty acids. In fact, the precursor of vitamin D in the skin, which gets turned into the active form of vitamin D via sunlight, is a very cholesterol-like precursor, okay? Which of course makes sense because, again, all of these substances are in some sort similar to each other. They are all very fatty acid-like. So it also makes more sense that, of course, if you have a lot of fatty acids in your food, a lot of cholesterol in your food, then vitamin D is, dissolved very properly in that conglomerate of compounds and can be, taken up alongside with those compounds. So the assimilation, the digestion of vitamin D is better in the presence of fatty foods makes a lot of sense as well. Again, when it comes to transportation throughout the body of vitamin D, I think we're stepping onto terrain that is very, very complex. I personally don't know anything about the subject, honestly. But what I can tell you is that if you get enough sun exposure to a lot of different areas of your skin, then theoretically you should have no problems with, getting that vitamin D that you have also properly distributed throughout your body. I wouldn't know any reason why this wouldn't occur then, not properly, via the lymph or a little bit also via the blood. Again, I think that more of it is actually present in the lymph because there is a much more fats present in the lymph. And then we've got, on the other hand, of course, Vegan Gains, who does the usual, science pounding parrot, who simply states, yeah, vegans can get enough vitamin D. Vegans can also absorb vitamin D from food very easily. You just simply have to eat more coconut oil and more, plant fats, healthy plant fats, all based off of quote unquote vegan science, of course. I wouldn't rely on that, to be honest. There's quite a couple of, anecdotal evidence, quote unquote, of people who simply raised their vitamin D levels easily without supplementing whatsoever after reintroducing animal foods into their diet, and also simply feeling better. Also simply having a better skin tone. Also simply having a better response to sun exposure in general, better tanning. This is one very significant thing actually that I noticed with a couple of people, that when they reintroduce animal food into their diet, their resistance against UV rays from the sun obviously becomes greater, because their ability to tan becomes better. They tan much quicker and they tan darker. And also their skin tone is a lot more smooth, and they don't get sunburned that easily. So all of that seems to, there seems to be a conglomerate of effects there at work, and certainly vitamin D plays a role there as well, just as well as cholesterol and, fatty acids, and their general protective effect in a number of things, in a number of ways probably, because all these compounds are very present in our cell membranes and probably are very responsible for the general health of the cell, and especially when it comes to skin, which is very exposed to UV rays. I think both contestants in that cat fight don't really know the core of the subject, and I gotta be honest with you, I myself don't know the core as well. And if I would have to guess, I would say that probably nobody knows really the core of the subject. Again, vitamin D, one of these vitamins, actually more consisted to be a hormone in the human body, actually existing in a number of different forms. All these different forms have certain metabolic pathways, have certain tasks, certain purposes. What we do see is that children who lack these compounds develop rickets, so it seems to be very important for calcium metabolism. And we also see a greater susceptibility of the skin against UV lights, sunburn and all that kind of stuff. Better skin tone in people who have enough of the substance, better tanning, better integrity of the skin, better skin smoothness and all that kind of stuff. Less acne and all of that as well, by the way. That's really all I have to say about the subject. It's really painful to watch these people, pretending they know all about it, especially Vegan Gains. I mean, the word picking that he does here is so childish from time to time. Actually, he's, I think, the older guy of the two, so he should be a little bit more mature than Frank Tufano. If I had to watch these two, I would say that Frank Tufano comes out on top of this fight. Although, again, Frank Tufano's debating capabilities are really horrible. But anyway, that's all for now. Bye.